Hello everyone, how are you? Now, I've just watched the first episode of BBC One's War of the Worlds, and I thought I might as well shoot an impromptu review of it. I was not actually planning to do this when I started watching the episode. However, I thought I may as well, considering that I've really experienced War of the Worlds in a fair few different mediums. I've experienced it via the 2005, I think, film. I've experienced it via the book, of course, the original radio show, and also the concept album from the 1970s. If no one's listened to that, it's very, very good. I've actually been to see it 4 times, so that's easily been my favourite adaptation of War of the Worlds thus far. And they also did an audio drama using the music from that concept album, which is on Audible. This video is not sponsored. However, I can recommend it nonetheless because it was a great listen. But how does this one compare? Well, I personally really enjoyed it. However, it did make a lot of changes to the books actually, and not many of them were taking away. It actually added a fair bit. But it also changed the order of things, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. But first of all, I would like to say that this is an immensely well-made show. Some of it was actually shot in Liverpool, which is where I'm recording this. I'm at university at the moment, hence why I don't have the normal background behind me. And for the instalment for next week's episode, I could actually see the front of St George's Hall, which I walk past fairly regularly, so it'll be cool seeing that as part of the show. I'm pretty sure it's masquerading as London in this show because everything shot in Liverpool is seemingly masquerading as either London or New York, which is a bit depressing really, isn't it? But overall, it was very, very entertaining. It was a very well acted show. The special effects were some of the best I've ever seen from the BBC. The only special effects I can think of that the BBC have ever done that could top this is His Dark Materials, which is currently coming out at the moment. Highly recommend watching that as well if you haven't yet. I might do a review on that by the end of the series, but I'm a bit less familiar with the books for His Dark Materials. I haven't actually read Northern Lights, whereas I've experienced War of the Worlds in a lot of different mediums. So I kind of feel like I can talk about this with a little bit more authority. Now, the show actually had some pretty novel ideas. It had certain scenes, certain sequences, which actually take place right at the end of the apocalypse, right at the end of the Martian invasion. And it actually fooled me. It does quite a good bait and switch. You think these shots are showing Mars, but in reality they're actually showing Earth after it's been colonised by the Martians. And that's something that the book never really did, that it didn't really play around with the timeline all that much. It was very linear, and most adaptations of the book have also been very linear, especially the radio show, which actually tried to make it seem as if it was happening in real time. But this show did actually decide to play around, which was quite a good idea. I thought that worked. And it also decided to play around with some of the human characters. Now, George, the main character, the journalist in the book, he actually is given a fair bit more personality in this. H.G. Wells, in his books, was fairly notorious for not really giving his human characters that much depth. They are in the story simply to give it grounding so that we can experience the apocalypse through their eyes. The War in the Air is another classic example where H.G. Wells does this. The human character is really only there so that we can see from his point of view. It's more like a point of view shot than an actual developed character. But in this show they did develop him. They gave him certain issues. He's not having a great time at work, at the newspaper he works at. He's having trouble there, which I thought was a really good addition, because in the book and in the concept album as well, he's constantly trying to get his work published in the newspaper. He wants to be the first to write about the Martian invasion. So making it seem that his work was mistreating him was actually a really nice touch, because it made it extra clear that he wants to get his name out, but all the odds are stacked against him. And that brings me to the other thing that they added to his character, which perhaps wasn't as good, and that was the fact that they made him currently going through a divorce. Now that's fine, I'm happy with that. However, he was going through that as the Martians were landing. So it's like, I don't really want to watch your divorce, mate. I'd much rather watch the Martians mess everything up. And honestly, the Martians were one of the highlights of the show. They were awesome. One of the difficulties with doing an adaptation of War of the Worlds is the fact that it's all been done before. War of the Worlds, the book, actually invented many of the cliches. It pretty much invented the alien invasion. It invented the idea of them flying everyone with lasers, that sort of thing. So trying to adapt War of the Worlds while staying loyal to the book is tricky, because you fall down a lot of cliches that weren't actually cliches when the book was written. It's because everyone since then has copied War of the Worlds. And they actually jazzed it up in quite a cool way. In the book, the Martians sort of arrive in this rocket thing, this great big cylinder which the top unscrews off, and then a laser comes out and fries everyone. However, in this show, the cylinder that they arrive in, it's actually not cylindrical at all. It's actually spherical, and it looks like an egg, which is really cool. I love the fact that instead of arriving in a ship per se, the Martians have hatched out of an egg. That's really cool. The design of the Martian tripods were also very, very cool. I would say they're probably cooler than the designs for the movie, and I liked the designs for the Tom Cruise movie. Yeah, I should specify, I'm talking about the modern movie, not the movie from the 50s, which I haven't seen actually. That's the one area of War of the Worlds that I am not versed in, so I need to get on that. I thought they were absolutely stunning. Once again, they looked practically organic. They didn't look artificial at all. They looked like they were bodies, pretty much, that the Martians were living in. It was very, very bizarre. But that's very true to what the book did. In the book, the Martians really were these very strange beings. They were unlike anything on Earth. It was life as we don't know it. And I won't spoil too much, because there's a fantastic bit in the book, which I'm hoping they'll recreate in the show, which actually describes the anatomy of the Martians, and that's really cool, because it makes you realise how unlike humans they are. It makes you wish that a lot more Hollywood designs for aliens were a little bit more creative. And H.G. Wells was doing this in the late Victorian era. The guy was ahead of his time by decades, really. And really, the main criticism of the show is the fact that it rushes through things a little bit. Now, I get that. You want a fast pace. You want it to be bam, bam, bam. You want, they were terrible clicks. You want your audience to actually be invested, and one of the ways you do that is by having non-stop action. But the book was able to build up suspense quite slowly and in a very measured manner. Like, for instance, in the book, you've already seen the Martians a hell of a lot before the first tripods appear. They've been on Earth for a good while by the time you first see the tripods, and they appear at night, and it would have been difficult to show on film, but I like the idea of the tripods arriving at night. That would have looked cool. As it is, the tripod arriving in the show was one of the highlights, because at first you don't even see it, and then you only see its legs, and then you only see it as it's appearing behind a church tower, and then finally you see it in all its glory. So it's revealed gradually, and that was very effective. Every now and then it utilised slow-mo in what could be considered a bit of a cheesy way. The live show actually did that as well. The live show for the concept album, that had a big screen behind the musicians where it had visuals from the book, and a lot of them were slow-mo. So I wonder if they actually saw the live show and took inspiration from that. It didn't detract from it at all. It just felt like that's something that's been done a little bit, but all the same, I'm certainly glad they did it. It definitely worked. it raised suspense, and at the end of the day, I really enjoyed it. It was a very good first episode. My only concern is that they're going to rush through it in less episodes than the book deserves. You know, this book has a lot of subject matter in it, and if possible, you should drag it out, because that's what the book does, and it does so in a very, very well done way. But on the whole, I can't complain. This is probably going to be one of my all-time favourite adaptations of War of the Worlds. I can already tell I'm going to absolutely love it, and I will probably be releasing another one of these next Monday after I've watched episode 2.